down or post them in the chat, and we will compile them for the Q&A session at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Thanks so much, Dorothy. We are very fortunate to have as our keynote speaker today, Dr. Mary Gomes, who has been a faculty member and instructor at Sonoma State University for over 25 years. Mary's work has been informed in part by having grown up on the East Coast, near where I grew up on Long Island, and then living for many years in California. She's been further shaped and nourished by a range of intellectual and spiritual influences, including Tibetan Buddhism, paganism, bioregionalism, and the Grateful Dead. Yay. Mary has developed and taught unique courses at Sonoma State University on the interpretation of dreams, the building of self-compassion, and probably most relevant to this symposium, eco-psychology, which focuses on the relationship between human flourishing and the well-being of the earth that we share. Mary is presenting today on The Nature We Love is the Nature We Protect, University Sustainability Efforts and Campus Nature RX. Mary, we are so glad that you will be sharing your knowledge with all of us.
Thank you so much, Don. And I don't know where you got all that information, but it is all true. Thank you so much for the thorough, lovely introduction. And I am just honored to be here today giving the keynote. Campus Nature RX has been such an integral part of what I've been up to at Sonoma State over the last 5 or so years. And being able to connect in this way today is just a delight. So I would like to open with a quote from one of my favorite books, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The circle of ecological compassion we feel is enlarged by direct experience of the living world and shrunken by its lack. This is the first of many quotes that I'll be sharing from Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a best-selling author, MacArthur Fellow, botanist, member of the Potawatomi Nation, and a professor of environmental biology at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. And I like to think of her as my invisible co-presenter today. Her work has been a profound influence. And as this quote suggests, I strongly believe that creating opportunities for students to connect with nature is one of the best things we can do for ecological sustainability. And I hope that by the end of this talk that many of you agree. So let me introduce myself a bit here in addition to what Don has already shared. I am saying this as a person who wears 2 hats at my university. My first hat is that of a psychology professor at Sonoma State in Northern California. And in this role, I've been following the growing body of work, as all of you have, I'm sure, on the mental health benefits of time spent in nature. And so I'm routinely sharing this work with my students through motivating them with the evidence to actually get outside, assigning homework to them to spend time in nature. During the pandemic, I created a sit spot exercise where every student was going outside to their spot regularly and building on the experience over the course of the semester. And finally, directly bringing them outside on our beautiful campus whenever possible. And this picture that's currently up is taken from our campus. So that's my first hat. My second hat is that of faculty sustainability chair at my university. In this role, I'm often thinking about our impact on the world, what we can do as a university to create conditions now and in the future of living in balance with nature. And although these two perspectives of how we benefit from nature and how we can give back to the world are deeply intertwined, they often inhabit different intellectual and organizational worlds, which makes it harder for needed cross-fertilization to occur. And this is where my third hat comes in. As Don mentioned, I'm an eco-psychologist, and this is an area of thought that focuses on the relationship between humans and the natural world, how we receive from nature, as well as how we give back. It's an interdisciplinary field with its eye on healing this relationship, which is often a fraught one at this time. Eco-psychology digs deep to explore the threads that tie human suffering with ecological destruction, and also that tie human thriving with nature's flourishing and regeneration. As an eco-psychologist, I'm looking to find and create bridges between these two worlds of nature-based emotional health on the one hand, and environmental sustainability on the other, reflecting the idea that all flourishing is indeed mutual. So, why is this bridging so important? Sustainability on university campuses tends to focus on a variety of metrics, such as the number of courses offered on sustainability, campus energy use, investment holdings, and the like. And to be sure, these things are important in and of themselves and as a way of tracking our progress, keeping us on track. They can reflect meaningful information about how we embody sustainability on our campuses. But we can do more. I believe that campuses can and should be places that create the conditions for students to develop the motivation, knowledge, skills, and vision to become lifelong sustainability advocates. And these things are often developed in a person's relationship with living nature. This reflects a transformative rather than an instrumental vision of higher education. And so again, in the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer, this is our work, to discover what we can give. Isn't this the purpose of education? To learn the nature of your own gifts and how to use them for good in the world. So for most of human history, sustainability and nature connection were not considered to be separate. For instance, indigenous traditional ecological knowledge grows out of myriad intimate encounters with nature, often over multiple generations. The knowledge and action that arise are simultaneously practical, emotional, and spiritual. It is in cultures like the modern West where these things have been split apart. I believe that for deep and long-term healing, we need to bring them back together in our universities and elsewhere. So as I said earlier, I believe that creating opportunities for students to connect with nature is one of the best things we can do for ecological sustainability. So let's look at the evidence. As campus CNRx members, you probably already know that we have ample evidence that connection with nature is good for our physical and mental health, but it goes further. We also have evidence that nature connection, just simple everyday connection, like listening to birds singing, is linked to support for nature conservation, biodiversity, and sustainable living. And we see it on large and small scales. From developmental and psychobiographical studies linking early bonding with nature to adult ecological activism. So there's the big scale. Some of our most honored environmentalists and ecological writers had their roots as children out in nature. So to the smaller scale of lab studies demonstrating that people who are shown nature videos have increased pro-environmental behavior, such as making a commitment to recycling or giving money to an environmental organization. So we see it across scales, this interconnection. The evidence is strong and growing. But let's zoom in on one study. In a 2020 paper, Miles Richardson and colleagues at the University of Derby in the UK found that spending time in nature was one of the strongest predictors of pro-conservation behavior. Anything from getting in touch with local authorities on nature conservation issues to planting pollinator-friendly plants. These were the kinds of pro-conservation behaviors that they were tracking, reflecting both collective and individual actions. But it's not just a matter of time spent in nature that leads people to support conservation. Even more important was engagement with nature through simple, accessible activities, such as listening to birdsong, collecting shells and pebbles, smelling flowers, or watching bees. Many of the things that I believe we are doing as part of this Campus CNRx network. Things that bring people into intimate contact with nature through their senses. And findings such as these have led Carleton University psychologists Elizabeth Nisbet and John Zelensky to call contact with nature the happy path to sustainability, which I imagine is in contrast to the unhappy path of obligation, fear, and guilt. So in other words, looking to love rather than fear as a motivator. So turning to some of the particulars of what we're doing at Sonoma State. How do we make use of this knowledge? As I said earlier, the worlds of Campus CNRx and university sustainability initiatives are often quite removed from one another.
Yes.
With the sustainability efforts largely focused on more direct and measurable aspects of sustainability, such as the number of courses offered or campus energy use. And we need to keep doing this valuable work. And at the same time, look at how we can help students to create a vibrant, living, enduring relationship to the natural world. So I'd like to share several projects that our sustainability group has undertaken at Sonoma State, which highlight the importance of nature connection in creating a sustainable campus climate. So we have a gorgeous green campus, and yet many students are unaware of the campus nature areas, which include a creek, a small forest, and a butterfly garden, to name just a few. But unfortunately, with all the time demands on students' lives, as well as the location of many of these areas on the periphery of campus, most students barely know that they exist. And I tend to take my classes out to them whenever I can. And when I do, I'll often ask the students, have you been here before? Did you even know this was here? And routinely, the small handful of students that raised their hands were the ones that were in the class I taught the prior semester, and they knew about it because I dragged them out. So I've been very focused on just making the places more known and accessible to students as a beginning step. So one of the projects is what you see here on this slide, which is in our current new student orientations. As one step to remedying this lack of awareness, we started including nature tours as part of orientation, as a way of orienting students not only to the university, but to the land. Students from my eco-psychology class, who you see here, willingly showed up on campus a week before classes started to be tour guides. The beginning of college life is an important time to set the tone that this land can be an integral part of their college experience. As a way of reaching out to all members of campus, we've also created a Nature Connections webpage on our sustainability website. And this page, which can be accessed through the QR code here, is designed to be a central location where students and other Sonoma State community members can find everything they need to embark on their journey of nature connection. Unfortunately, there's not an easy way to take you through this website, but I do want to say that at this point, and this was just launched about 2 months ago, so it's going to grow from where it is now, but at this point, it includes bilingual maps of campus nature areas, a set of guided nature meditations that I created during that pandemic eco-psychology class. And the guided nature meditations give students a variety of ways to sink more fully into nature, from sensory awareness practices to compassion meditations focused on nature, using some of the phrasing that you might find in traditional compassion meditations, just like me, this being wishes to avoid suffering, just like me, this crow wishes to be happy, extending beyond the human realm. Some of my favorites of these include practices of removing the pronoun it from their vocabulary when thinking about nature beings, animals, plants, or fungi, instead using he, she, or they. Subject-object reversals, where the person meditating focuses on being seen by the animals they encounter rather than seeing them. And finally, one of my favorites, a meditation on receiving love from nature in addition to extending it. And I will say that that's one that often stirs up very complex reflections on the part of the students when they've done it in my classes. And I think it's an interesting and important step toward a deeper relationship. Next slide. The final example project that I wanted to speak to is a new campus Earth Week tradition that we've created that brings the campus community together, students, staff, faculty, and administrators, to plant trees and work on campus restoration projects. And we make a point of providing educational materials, connecting the dots for the participants about how our activities contribute to campus sustainability, while at the same time, participants are deepening their sense of place on the campus. Projects such as these reflect a holistic understanding of sustainability, in which the emotional bond with nature takes center stage as a source of motivation toward ecological sustainability and a source of knowledge about nature. So I'd like to shift now into some thoughts about building bridges at your university. And I really put this talk together imagining that I'm primarily speaking to people who are more focused on the nature connection side and how to bridge out to sustainability efforts. Although I saw in the introductions in the chats that it's actually a mix of people. And so I encourage that bridge to happen from all directions. So in this slide, those of you who are affiliated with a university probably have some kind of sustainability initiatives on your campus. And for instance, maybe you've heard of STARS reports, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, which is part of ASHE, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. The STARS system is commonly used to track a campus's progress in becoming more sustainable. Out of curiosity, several weeks ago, I went down the list of campus CNRx institutional members, and about 50% of the campuses have active STARS ratings. And the other half most likely have their own different sustainability efforts underway. So the people working on these efforts on your campuses are potential allies in the quest to connect people to nature on our campuses, and I recommend reaching out to them. The potential for collaboration is sometimes quite direct. For instance, I'm currently finding ways to translate nature connection projects into STARS points. And I'd like to see more and more of that happening, because that does, what shows up on the STARS report is often a strong influence on the campus priorities. But even if it isn't translated into metrics and ratings, you might find people interested in collaboration on projects that bring people back to nature, that help students become, in the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer, naturalized to place. And in her words, she says, being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink that build your body and fill your spirit. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters, to take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do. So campus sustainability officers, whether faculty, admin, or staff, are often involved as a labor of love, and many will be potentially open to collaborations, not because they can be readily measured, but because we're in it for the long haul and know that these efforts are the seeds of a positive future that we are in a unique position to plant. So some concluding thoughts here. Some people might ask, who has time to create nature awareness sites on campus when climate change is bearing down on us and our ecological footprints are out of control, when there are solar panels to build and STARS reports to complete? Well, what's missing from this particular vision of sustainability is love and the kind of knowledge and commitment that comes only in the presence of love. One of our goals in campus sustainability is educating students to think deeply and creatively, to help us move towards social structures that are compatible with the cycles of life. This is a tall order, but a necessary one. Overarching societal transformation. And once again, connection with living nature can help. Immersing ourselves in living ecosystems, letting our imaginations be nourished by a steady diet of nature, gives us better access to creative, out-of-the-box thinking. And there's research on this as well. The diversity inherent in nature shows us our way to a diversity of thought and ideas. And so one final quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer: imagine the access we would have to different perspectives, the things we might see through other eyes, the wisdom that surrounds us. We don't have to figure out everything for ourselves. There are intelligences other than our own, teachers all around us. Imagine how much less lonely the world would be. We can and should continue to do all the things we're currently doing as sustainability officers on campuses. Install the solar panels, charge the electric vehicles, rethink campus investments. But at the same time, we can be planting seeds of love. So I want to thank many people here. I would like to thank Dr. Karen Moransky, the provost at Sonoma State University, whose strong support of these campus projects has been just crucial to everything that we've been doing. Dr. Claudia Luke, director of the Sonoma State Center for Environmental Inquiry, who's a collaborator on many of these projects and a model of how to bridge these two worlds. I'd like to thank all my sustainability colleagues and eco-psychology students at Sonoma State. It really is true that it takes a village to do this work, and the village there has been delightful. And then finally, I would like to thank Campus CNRx for the opportunity to share these ideas today.
Thank you so much, Mary. You've really given us a lot to think about, and I think that your suggestions are going to be equally appealing to sustainability officers as well as those working on Campus CNRx efforts. We do have a few minutes, so if anyone would like to post a question specifically for Mary Gomes in the chat, we can read those questions and hopefully Mary can address them. So right now would be the time to do that.
And Don, while we're waiting for people to put in their questions, I just want a quick reminder to everyone and welcome to anybody who's joined in the meantime. that we're going to have breakout sessions at the end of the day, at the end of the symposium. We'll have 4 sessions that you may be interested in joining. You can join anyone you want. There'll be a Campus Nature RX teaching session by Stacy Parker at UC Davis will be moderating that. Don Rakow will be moderating the session on outreach, and I will be moderating a session on research. And then there's another room for those of you who may want to just network more informally. We do have
Thank
a
you.
question in the chat.
Yeah. Mary, Jason Yoder has asked, could you speak more about the outdoor campus tours for new students?
Sure. So at this point, these are taking place at the new student, freshman, and transfer orientations that happen about a week before the semester starts. And our most, but not all of our nature areas are clustered around the Copeland Creek. So it makes for quite an easy, it's about a 45-minute walk, led by 1 or 2 students and sometimes myself. And so depending on the particulars of who's leading the tour, sometimes what we'll do, especially when I'm leading it, is we go to various spots and actually do some of the sensory awareness practices. When they're student-led, there's a little bit less of that and just more talking about basically how the student tour guide has been able to make use of those places for their own well-being and balance. And then primarily just letting the new students know that they exist and are there for them to access at any point.
We have another question from Yvette Marie Robles. Do you partner with Native people? And if so, can you share a bit about that?
Yes, we do. And we're at the early phases of redoing our, we have the forest that I mentioned earlier is also a native plant garden. And the signage in that garden is in dire need of updating. It hasn't happened in about 25 years. And so we're looking at partnering with the Grayton Rancheria, in particular, the local Miwok group, to have multilingual signage there, and to kind of focus on some of the traditional uses of the plants. And eventually, one of my more long-term goals is to have more of an actual native cultural part of the garden that really gets into some of the deeper cultural material and history. I was very inspired by what happened at Davis. I saw the gardens there and toured with one of the Campus Nature RX members. And I don't think we have the budget to do something quite as lovely and extensive as what Davis has done, but what we will do there will definitely be in partnership with the native tribes.
Great. We do have,
Oh, and I would
yes,
like to just add something for people who are interested
sure.
in similar cross-cultural work. I've found the Red Bud Resource Center to be a very helpful organization. And I would highly recommend signing up for some of their workshops as far as how to do that work in an appropriate and respectful way.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Michelle Titterton has written, I think this is such an important area, and as you mentioned, in this space, metrics and statistics are important, but how do we humanize this? I struggle with using statistics on nature and wellness. I think access is something we can measure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because as in so many parts of life, it's like there's the aspects that are measurable, and then there are the aspects that are immeasurable and or not measurable. And it's important to measure well what we can measure, but to not lose sight. For instance, I think about some of those psychobiographies of, people who their connection with nature and as a child inspired them to do amazing things for the earth as an adult. There's no way to track that, to predict that, right? And thinking about the students whose lives we touch and how some of them might go on to make wonderful, changes in the world, but it's not something that's going to be a statistical event, right? It's a one-time event. And so many of the things that I think are the most important